Next up, a conversation on universal basic income. Please welcome to the stage Andrew Yang, 2020 presidential candidate and founder of Venture for America. Back to lead the conversation is the Atlantic's Derek Thompson.
Hi again. Andrew, you're running for president.
Yes, I am.
And you're running for president based on this issue of UBI, Universal Basic Income. So before we talk about the positives and negatives of this proposal and what it might do to America, let's just define it to make sure that we're all on the same page. What is a universal basic income? What is your plan?
Sure, I just want to give a little bit of a run-up to how I arrived at this point. Now, I spent the last 7 years helping create 3,000 jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Alabama, Louisiana, and I'm convinced now that we're pouring water into a bathtub that has a giant hole ripped in the bottom. So universal basic income is a policy where every member of a society, let's say every American adult, receives a certain amount of money to meet his or her basic needs every month. And my plan, the Freedom Dividend, is that every American adult would receive $1,000 per month, free and clear.
$1,000 per month, every American over the age of 18. This to a lot of people is going to sound like a completely nutso idea. So just to be clear, has the US ever, has any government body in the US, existing or past, ever done anything like this?
Well, a law essentially identical to this passed the House of Representatives in 1971 under Richard Nixon. Martin Luther King was for it, Milton Friedman was for it, and 1,000 economists signed a letter saying this would be great for the economy and society. And then a number of years later, Alaska passed something identical to this in the form of the petroleum dividend, where everyone in Alaska today receives between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked, from the petroleum fund. And if you think about this for a moment, Alaska is a deep red conservative state. And the Republican governor made this case to the Alaskan people. He said, who would you rather get the oil money? The government who's just going to screw it up, or you, the Alaskan people? And the Alaskans said, us. And then now the petroleum dividend is wildly popular. It has increased it's improved children's health and nutrition. It has created thousands of jobs, and no one can touch it. And that's been in effect for 36 years. So if you think about it, what is the oil of the 21st century? The oil of the 21st century is data, AI, autonomous vehicles, and advanced technologies. And that's how we're going to pay for a freedom dividend for all Americans.
So a radical solution like this seems to at least imply a radical problem. You have this book called The War on Normal People. What is the problem that this country and other developed and developing economies are going to face in the near future that you think necessitates a policy like UBI?
So I want everyone here to reflect, why is Donald Trump our president today? And the reason why Donald Trump is our president today is this. We automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, all of the swing states that he needed to win. And now we're about to do the same thing to millions of retail jobs, call center jobs, truck driving jobs, fast food jobs, which are unfortunately the 4 most common jobs in the economy. Now, I have many friends in Silicon Valley who are working on this, who know full well that this trend is about to accelerate. So if we don't wake up and start implementing meaningful solutions to the fact that we are going through the greatest economic and technological transition in the history of the world, then we are doomed to much, much worse than Donald Trump.
A criticism of this piece, a criticism of this argument says, all right, maybe we're entering the most radical transformation of the US economy in the history of the country, but also maybe we're not. Like, look at the unemployment rate. It's under 4%. In a period of technological unemployment, with robots taking all of our jobs, one thing you should absolutely see is rising productivity. Instead, we see flatlining productivity. Another thing that you should see theoretically is that wage growth should be completely stagnant, particularly at the bottom. And in fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics just said today that wage growth is accelerating not only for the entire country, but in the last few years, going back to the end of the Obama administration, wage growth was rising the fastest at the bottom. So what's going on? If the robots are really coming, why can't we see it in the numbers yet?
So if you look at the headline unemployment rate, it measures the people in the workforce who are looking for work. What it does not measure is the fact that right now our labor force participation rate is 62.9%, a multi-decade low and the same levels as El Salvador and the Dominican Republic. And that is right now in year 10 of an expansion. You can look that stat up. Almost 1 in 5 prime working age men in America between the ages of 21 and 30, it has not worked in the last 12 months. So there's a massive displacement, particularly of unskilled men, that the rosy unemployment stat, which is essentially government misinformation and malpractice at this point, does not bring to light. And the productivity stats, I mean, they're not going to show anything. They're going to show a big 0 for self-driving cars and trucks until the self-driving cars and trucks hit the road. And my friends in Silicon Valley believe we are 5 to 10 years away from automating away truck drivers. Trucking is the most common job in 29 states. Now think about this. There are 3.5 million truck drivers in the United States, average age 49, 94% male, average education high school. They make about $46,000 a year. On the other side, you have my friends in Silicon Valley who are gunning for the $168 billion per year in labor savings, fuel efficiency, equipment utilization, fewer accidents, and they think that they are 5 to 10 years away. So what's going to happen when those 3.5 million truckers start losing their jobs? And as you suggest, Derek, the stats will show none of this until it happens, but we're not ostriches. You know, we don't have to have our heads in the sand and just be like, oh, it's never going to happen. I mean, we can all see it happening if we just wake up and open our eyes.
My sense is that every room like this is always relatively divided between some people who say, I believe it, technological unemployment is coming, the robots will take our jobs, even if you can't see it in the numbers, and some people who say, I don't think this future is coming at all. But I want to be clear and to be fair to universal basic income, because this is a solution that's not like a knee replacement for a failing knee, something that only makes sense given the eventual occurrence of technological unemployment. It's more like aspirin. It's like, yes, it can help with the headache, but it might also be good for heart problems, and it might also be good for general bodily health. So even if this future of the robots taking our jobs doesn't come to pass, what are the other benefits of UBI that you see?
Yes. So if you look at what's happening in America today, a mindset of scarcity has swept most of the country, where 57% of Americans today cannot afford an unexpected $500 bill. So they're lurching week to week, month to month, and asking them to be positive about the future is unrealistic. Now, if you put $1,000 a month into the hands of American families, what you see very clearly in the data is you see an improvement in child nutrition and health, you see an improvement in graduation rates, you see an improvement in mental health, you see lower levels of domestic violence, you see lower hospital visits. So these are things that you would expect 100% very, very clearly just by putting $1,000 into the hands of American families. I also want to say on a more fundamental level, right now, our economic stats, for example, they dismiss the work of moms. And my wife is at home with our 2 young boys right now, one of whom is autistic, and GDP will measure her contribution at 0. When really her contribution is what we need more of and more of in an age where we're going to be automating away more and more work. So we need to broaden our conceptions of both work and value to become much, much bigger and broader. And this is necessary, in my mind, in part, to achieve some measure of racial and gender inequality, because the marketplace will systematically disregard and undervalue the work of women, and will also systematically exclude underrepresented minorities from meaningful opportunities.
I think I'm really glad you said that. The last person who was on the stage with me, Phil Thompson, the deputy mayor of New York City, was talking about the growing need for personal care aides and home health aides, the 2 fastest growing jobs according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics over the next decade. These are jobs whose average salary is below $30,000. But taking care of the old and the sick and those who can't take care of themselves, even if the market values that as an extremely unvaluable service, it's clearly immensely valuable to families.
Yes, and that's something that I can't tell you how frustrating I find it when people are like, oh, we're going to need more of this. It's like, yes, we are going to need more of that, but right now that job pays $25,000 a year with a turnover rate of 100%. So if that's the job of the future, like, is that really the plan? So what we need to do is we need to create our own estimation of how these things ought to be valued, because the market is going to punish many of these things. The market does not recognize caregiving, arts and creativity, journalism, the environment, infrastructure and public goods. And so we need to broaden our conception of GDP. GDP is something we invented almost 100 years ago during the Great Depression. And even the inventor said this is a terrible measurement of national well-being and we should never use it as that. And we should include parenthood and motherhood in the calculation. So we need to evolve to the next stage of capitalism right now in 2018 and 2020 and redefine our economic measurements to include things like childhood success, mental health and freedom from substance abuse, levels of engagement with work. I mean, what percentage of Americans do you think like their jobs right now? I'm sure you all like your jobs, but, but most Americans do not. Environmental quality. If we create a more holistic measurement for the economy, we would also create touch points for many more Americans, particularly those who are about to be displaced from the workforce or have already been displaced, to be able to participate in meaningfully.
All right, I have three big critiques that I need to go through with you. Those are basically cost, inflation, and laziness. Let's go through them in that order. Cost. You're proposing $1,000 for every single person in this room, every single month, every single 280 million Americans every single month. $12,000 for 280 million people.
Well, it's only adults, so it shrinks it a bit.
It's only adults. Well, yeah, but the population is like 320 million, so I was trying to do a fast mental math on that. 250 million people, let's say. How much is this going to cost, and can we afford it?
Yes. So the headline cost is about $2.4 trillion per year. For context,
say that one more time.
$2.4 trillion a year would be the headline cost.
And the U.S. government currently spends just under $4 trillion a year.
The federal budget is $4 trillion. The economy is up to $19 trillion, up $4 trillion in the last 10 years. So $2.4 trillion seems like a lot, but if you break it down, it actually becomes affordable very quickly. Now, the big change we need to make is we need to be in position to harness the gains from artificial intelligence and new technologies. The big winners from those technologies are going to be Amazon, Google, Apple, Uber, like the mega tech companies with trillion-dollar valuations. And the trap we're in right now is that they do not pay a lot of tax. Amazon's trick is we didn't make any money this quarter, no taxes. Alphabet's trick is it all went through Ireland, nothing to see here. And so as these companies soak up more and more value, the public's going to be seeing less and less, even as the opportunities disappear. So what we need to do is we need to join every other industrialized country in the world and have a value-added tax, which would give the public a slice of every Google search and every Amazon transaction.
Which is the equivalent, from the consumer standpoint, of a consumption tax. That's how a lot of people will experience it, right?
Yeah, but it applies to businesses at every level of production. So it's like oxygen, and every other advanced country has already done this. Because our economy is so vast, a value-added tax at even half the European level would generate almost $1 trillion in revenue for the U.S. That, plus the $800 billion we currently spend on welfare spending, plus the fact that by putting $1,000 into the hands of American adults, you'd grow the economy by 12% and we'd get back $500 billion in new tax revenue, plus the hundreds of billions we would save in healthcare, incarceration, homelessness services, and the massive value gains from having a population with higher education rates, better health, better nutrition, better mental health, better productivity. All of those things together would make the freedom dividend pay for itself and then some, conservatively. We have to start investing in our people. Good companies invest in their people, but then in the public space we say, oh, we have to try and treat everyone like costs and avoid spending money. And that's the opposite of what we need. We need to reverse the mindset of scarcity with a mindset of abundance. And the best way to do that is to secure Americans' futures.
Okay, so when some economists hear mindset of abundance, they think that's a lot more money flowing around the same economic system. We're giving a bunch of people who are only making, say, $20,000 a year an extra $12,000 a year. Why isn't inflation going to go completely crazy on a bunch of consumer staples, especially those that are overconsumed by the poorest Americans?
Well, if you look at the causes of inflation right now in the US, they tend to fall into three buckets: housing, education, and healthcare. If you look at consumer goods, they're actually not surging in price. A lot of them are even getting cheaper. So that's clothing, electronics, media, the things that people consume. And so putting money into people's hands, there's no reason to think that it would cause a surge in the prices of these consumer goods where the market is quite efficient, because there's still going to be a lot of price sensitivity. It's not like these people all of a sudden are like, oh, I can pay $10 for a burger. It's like price sensitivity will still be there, and then there'll still be competition between firms in every particular industry and vertical. So really the cause of inflation right now in the US are around these protected dysfunctional markets of healthcare, education, and housing.
All right, last question before we turn to questions. Very quickly, why won't this make us all lazy? Why won't free money just turn us into a nation of layabouts?
Yes, so $1,000 a month is still below the poverty line in this country. The poverty line is $12,770. There is no reason to think that everyone's going to be like, oh, I've got $1,000 a month, I can live large and stay at home. Even if you're a server making $24,000 a year, are you really going to take a 50% pay cut and stay home? But if you keep working, you're up to $36,000. Maybe you can actually put a little bit of money away, start getting ahead, take your kid out for a movie. The data, and I'm a very data-driven guy, the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes numbers. And the data says that only two groups work fewer hours with more money. New mothers who spend more time with their kids, which I think we can all get behind, and teenagers who graduate from high school at higher levels.
Andrew, thank you. We've got time for a couple questions. Let's see. How about right over here in the back?
Kind of reminds me of Lyndon. This kind of reminds me of Lyndon B Johnson's "We're going to make America great again" type of concept. How different will that be? Where after Lyndon B Johnson, a lot of individuals did fall into that laziness, that idea of the government will support or help support. How different is this idea?
Well, one thing I love about universal basic income is that it aligns the incentives of the individual with societies. Where right now, for example, a disability program in the US, if you show yourself to be healthy, then your benefits disappear, and so everyone stays unwell, truly. I mean, the churn rate from long-term disability is literally 0% in this country. Whereas universal basic income, if you start to make any money or get ahead, you get to keep every dollar, and you still keep the dollar that we gave you. So the problem with a lot of the existing welfare programs is that they're designed to give you less if you start to succeed, and that's the opposite of what we need.
I'd also say really quickly, the labor force participation rate actually grew rather tremendously after the 1960s, especially as more women entered the labor force. We'll go with right here in the front.
Hi. Andrew, really interesting. How do you sell this to the American people who have words like socialism or handout, as you mentioned, laziness? How do you sell it? It's a great idea.
Well, I've been running for president now for a number of months. I've been to Iowa 5 times. And when I go to Iowa, I say to them, hey guys, have you noticed stores closing in your main streets? They say yes. And I say, why is that? They say, Amazon. It's like, yeah, is that going to get better or worse? Worse. What are you going to do about it? What can we do about it? I'll tell you what you can do about it. You can build a new economy from your people up, from your families up, from your communities up, the trickle-up economy. And to do that, all we need to do is vote in a freedom dividend. And the Democrats of Iowa are super excited about that possibility. Now, I was talking to Derek backstage, and he said, you're only talking to Democrats, and that's true. So the Democrats, I have to say, are very, very excited about this possibility. And so we need to convince the Democrats of Iowa, New Hampshire, and the rest of the country first, and then we can bring it to the rest of the country. But I have no doubts that we're going to be able to make this incredibly popular very quickly, because I'm already getting Trump supporters coming my way. Because if you think about conservatives and libertarians, what they hate is government making decisions and bureaucracy. What they like is self-determination and agency. And so a dividend that puts money into their hands is actually very, very appealing to a wide swath of Americans on both sides of the aisle.
Andrew, thank you, and thank you all.
Thank you all. This way.